different N-word, separate from the other N-word. Wonder if the weight of the African-American community. Feel it upon me, I do.
Grim Dawn is a game that excels in the execution and harmony of its mechanics, encouraging players to play the game repeatedly with multiple characters. This is done by designing methodical and logical combat, basing character progression and endgame around exploring different parts of the game world for immersion, and by creating different systems of character customization. Join me as I analyze how Grim Dawn executes and harmonizes the mechanics implemented. The first step in understanding Grim Dawn's success is to learn about the developers of the game, Create Entertainment. So stay a while and listen. Arthur Bruno founded Create Entertainment in 2008. He originally worked in Iron Lore Studios, the development team behind Titan Quest, a top-view isometric action RPG based on Greek mythology. He was able to form Create Entertainment with other members from Iron Lore Studios, and in 2009, Create Entertainment acquired the rights to use Titan Quest game engine to start working on their first title, Grim Dawn. Funding for the game was earned after launching a Kickstarter project on April 17, 2012. A month after the project launched, they earned more than $530,000, almost twice the original goal of $280,000. The game released on early access on Steam in May 2013, and eventually fully launched on February 2016 on both Steam and GOG. Grim Dawn later went on to sell 1 million copies by May 2016. The game launched its first DLC in August of 2016, with additional cosmetics on December, and launched its first expansion, The Ashes of Malmouth, on October 12, 2017. It's important to note that there are 13 members in Create Entertainment, all of whom are veterans. The additional members come from studios such as Irrational, Blizzard North, Harmonix, and 38 Studios. This is important to bring up because while they are a small team, these are a group of individuals who know how to implement their design choices as they want in their game and profit from it, especially when interacting with the player base for feedback. With another expansion, The Forgotten Gods, being released around next year, now is a good time to talk about what Grim Dawn, including its DLC game mode and expansion, has to offer. To be honest, the textures for human characters aren't impressive. Even setting textures at the highest quality doesn't make the human characters look good. Attack animations are done well enough to make attacks feel impactful. One issue with spellcasting is that weapons aren't used while casting spells. This makes sense when the spells involve throwing items or gadgets, but it's a different story with spells involving energy blasts. The experience would be more immersive when players channel spells through their equipment. Some spells require offhands in order to be usable, so it seems strange to not have animations in which characters use their offhands. This may be a small nitpick in the grand scheme of things, but it's one that Create Entertainment could tackle in the future. World design is the strongest aspect of Grim Dawn. The world is handcrafted, which means that all the locations in the game remain constant save for randomized obstacles when starting a session. As players play the game more, they'll eventually become familiar with the map and memorize quick paths for efficient exploration. The design ultimately makes exploration repetitive, but it's a small price to pay in order to make Grim Dawn an open-world game. Some areas are not visible in a map, making players explore more as these hidden areas often have challenging monsters, interesting loot, or quests that help in terms of character progression. The best way to explain the overall design of this game is akin to exploring a portrait. Environments can range from dark to bright locations with a surreal feel to it, but the grit in Grim Dawn is always persistent. The soundtrack most of the time is soothing and chilling. The vibe creates an uneasy atmosphere, even at moments of peace. Other environments will have different soundtracks as well, with some boss battles having rock tracks to make fights epic. The soundtrack does a fairly good job of what it's supposed to do, keeping players on their toes. But what is Grim Dawn? And what are the stakes in the game's story? The Grim Dawn is an apocalyptic event in which two monstrous entities breach the world of Cairn and wreak havoc. One of these entities are known as the Ethereals. They once served the gods of Cairn until they were cast off into the Aether. In time, they learned how to manipulate the Aether to manifest in Cairn and possess living beings. Their ultimate goal is to control and possess all living things in order to live in Cairn. Chthonians, on the other hand, are otherworldly beings and cultists that drain out the blood of living beings. The cult started out small, but their influence inconspicuously grew to the point that they could take over towns and summon Chthonian beings. Their ultimate goal is to drain all the blood of living beings and return them to Chthon, the father of the gods of Cairn, before being betrayed by them and have his blood used to create all life in Cairn. As a result of this devastating war, humanity is caught in the crossfire, and people must do what they can to survive. The protagonist is often referred to as the Taken, a person who was originally possessed by an ethereal spirit. This spirit flees the Taken's body in the last minute of being hanged in Devil's Crossing. Eventually, it is found that this individual has the ability to create rift portals as a side effect of being possessed, becoming an integral part of the plot, as this strategically can be used to secure locations controlled by enemy factions, as well as traveling between allied factions. It's never fully explained what the character was doing before possession, leaving it up to the player to imagine their character's lore. At the beginning of the game, John Bourbon, the leader of Devil's Crossing, points out that Devil's Crossing is under attack by the undead. It's discovered that an animator was responsible for creating the undead. After defeating the animator, the Taken must help out around Devil's Crossing for basic supply establishment. After aiding the denizens, the Taken heads off to Burwich to see how much control the Ethereals have in the region. It is later discovered that Warden Krieg is responsible for unleashing the Ethereals upon Burwich, making him the leader of that region as well as a primary threat. After Krieg's defeat, Bourbon points out that Devil's Crossing is low on food, and the only way to find more food is to establish a connection with Homestead, an agricultural district. The problem is, a crime lord known as Zarius Cronley is sending his henchmen to take over Devil's Crossing, and the Taken has to take out the gang to travel to Homestead. The Taken is suggested to meet up the rovers who settled near Cronley's hideout. Upon meeting the rovers, the Taken aids them in destroying the gang's weapon furnace and heads to the Cronley's hideout to kill him. After Cronley's death, the Taken traveled through the Arkovian Undercity to the Broken Hills and eventually passing Smuggler's Pass to reach Deadman's Gulch in order to get to Homestead for food. Upon reaching Deadman's Gulch, the Taken meets Olgrim, a warrior who has to help defend travelers from the trolls and ethereals in the area, and the only way for them to safely travel to Homestead is by establishing a rift portal connection with Homestead. After taking Olgrim and the travelers to safety, the Black Legion, an army defending Homestead, points out how Homestead is under attack by both the Ethereals and Chthonians. At the same time, the Dermapteran infestation is damaging the farms of Homestead, and the only way to stop them is to take out the hive in the rotting farmlands. Despite that, trust has to be built between the Taken and the farmers of Homestead before Homestead delivers food to Devil's Crossing, as the farmers have to make sure that they have enough food to take care of themselves. After taking out the ethereal threat to the west of Homestead, the Taken travels to the northeast of Homestead to save farmers captured by the cult of Chthon. Eventually, the Chthonians in Darkvale Gate have to be dealt with as they are blocking the path to Fort Icon, the current headquarters of the Black Legion. Once Darkvale Gate has been cleared, it is discovered that the Chthonians are preparing for a ritual to summon the Logorian, a being capable of causing great destruction on Cairn. After reaching Fort Icon via the Astrakhan Road, Creed reveals that a commander in the Black Legion had been possessed by an ethereal, and has taken the explosives needed to destroy the rubble on the exit to the City of the Dead. The Taken fights the possessed commander and retrieves the explosives as a reward, using it to clear the rubble to reach the City of the Dead. Eventually, the Taken and the Black Legion reach the City of the Dead, only for the entrance to the Seal of the Logorian to be blocked off. Only Olgrim is able to enter easily, but the Taken has to destroy the blood supply used to power the barrier and then follow Olgrim in suit. After reaching the deepest depths of the seal, the Taken and Ulgrim fight the Logorian. The monster dies, but at the price of consuming Ulgrim during the fight. The campaign ends with Creed promising to find a way to bring back Ulgrim from the void. The story overall is rather basic, and extra dialogue can be read for further understanding of the plot. The attempt to not leave behind a happy ending is understandable, as it leaves room for expansion content to be added to the game, but the ending does become rather lackluster. Another issue with the game is due to its open world nature, there's no discernible distinction between acts when playing the first time. One way to remedy this is to add cinematics when an NPC talks, to provide information about the next act, as well as intimidating players with the challenges ahead. Quests will be the main form of earning experience points, which help characters level up. This is done to ensure that the campaign of the story is properly played out since the story progresses through quests. Missions can be bypassed if the player desires by not interacting with NPCs, but the experience earned in completing them offers an easy way to become stronger. The tasks in Grim Dawn can also be completed in any order to the point that they can be completed even before talking to the NPC that provides the quest, maintaining the open world nature of Grim Dawn while giving quests relevance since the experience points rewarded is high enough to serve as a hook into the world's lore. Notes are scattered throughout Cairn, and reading notes provide experience points, incentivizing players to find more lore in the game. When notes are consumed, they can't drop again as a means to remove redundancy. Notes can be read through the player's journal tab. Many of these entries are well written as they are able to provide brief, insightful, and interesting stories about environments, people, and phenomena in Cairn. Ultimately, these lore entries are nice to read during breaks. Every once in a while, conversations with NPCs will provide players with choices. Many of the interactions with choices don't really have interesting results. It doesn't help that some are way more incentivizing than others. While this doesn't completely affect immersion, it's a bit disappointing that much more could have been done, such as adding a result that can be helpful to a character while providing drawbacks, making choices much more interesting in both role-playing and character development. Overall, the lore and world building of the game can fully immerse players despite the lackluster story. In addition to the story and lore, the controls and combat work well enough to provide an immersive experience. Grim Dawn is a top-view isometric ARPG. 2 playthroughs are available when creating a character, normal and hardcore. With normal playthroughs, characters leave a grave marker behind where they die, and that character loses their experience points. Those graves have to be touched to regain that lost experience. If a character dies again while a grave marker is up, it is then removed and a new one is placed where the character dies, which means that the experience points previously lost can't be regained. In veteran and higher difficulties, bosses that were fighting at the time of the Taken's death regain a certain amount of health. What this means is that players have to think about their battles, especially if the gear currently equipped doesn't really help their character survive in a fight. Hardcore is a different story. When a character dies, that character can't be played ever again, meaning that items on the dead character are gone for good. Characters start off in normal difficulty, which can be modified to veteran difficulty to make monsters more challenging, with rare gear dropping more consistently after fights. More difficulties are unlocked as players clear Act 4 of the campaign, all the way to Ultimate difficulty. Resistance penalties are applied to characters on Elite difficulty and Ultimate, with the penalties becoming greater as the difficulty increases. Once the Logorian is killed in Act 4, the next difficulty becomes available for that character. Playing higher difficulties is obviously a must, not just because the monsters are higher level, granting more experience, but because of the stronger equipment that can be acquired as rewards. Wording is fairly good in this game. In-game description for skills and items often have a lot of text, which can look daunting, but easily provides enough information for players to understand how things work. There is one part of wording that can be inconsistent, which is the skill recharge. Skill recharge is basically the time it takes for a skill to be usable again. The problem is, the beginning of the recharge time is dependent on the nature of the skill. Some skills start their recharge time the moment they're used, others begin once the skill ends. One recommendation is to change the name of the recharge based on the nature of the cooldown. By doing so, players understand easily when the skills become available, allowing for better character building as well as easier understanding of skill synergies. Grim Dawn can be played with either a mouse and keyboard, or a controller. For a mouse and keyboard, movement is done by clicking on an area with the left mouse button. The button can be dragged along different parts of the ground for continuous movement. To attack or use a skill, the target has to be highlighted first before clicking or pressing a button. Due to the nature of stairs in some areas, dragging can be problematic, making clicking the only option to maneuvering around. One thing to note in Grim Dawn is that scrolling up and down counts as different functions. When camera zooming is removed from those functions, they can be used to assign different skills, meaning even the simplest mouse can have up to 5 skills available. Controller support started as a side project. After some refinement, however, controller support became a viable option in Grim Dawn, to the point that a port for Xbox One is now in the works. 2 methods for controller support are available: by using the key binding menu in the options menu, or by using Steam's Big Picture mode. The first method is direct, but the big problem with this method is this is only limited to cross-input controllers. The second method requires players to be on Steam, and allow the Steam overlay to be available in-game. The biggest benefit to this method is that Steam Big Picture mode allows any controller to be used. Of course, this isn't much if Grim Dawn was installed from GOG. The left analog stick is used to move the character, while the right analog stick is used for camera control. The back button is used to open the character menu and inventory, and the start button pauses the game to the main menu. Whether you use Big Picture or enabled controller support in-game, buttons have to be assigned as either skill buttons or other functions. Previously, upon using a skill on a target area, the character would run up to the radius which the skill can be used. Due to the addition of controller support, the targeting system was refined so that a character uses a skill in a targeted direction. With these adjustments, it's a lot easier not only for people who play with a controller, but for those who play with a mouse and keyboard as well, especially for players who use ranged characters. 2 skill bars are available for each character, allowing for organization of skills depending on usage. Each skill bar has up to 10 slots, where potions and skills can be assigned. For keyboard and mouse, skill and item assignment is done by right-clicking on the slot. Skill and item assignment for controllers can only be done though in the skill menu. 2 weapon loadouts are also available per character, which can be switched with the press of a button. Be wary though that switching weapon loadouts affects the skill loadout on the left and right mouse buttons. By default, health and energy potions are placed on the skill bar, but they have their own consumption buttons by default as well. It's not recommended to remove them from those slots though in order to know the amount of potions left. This begs the question as to why they don't have their own potion slots on the UI. Having those 2 free slots could be used for additional skills. This probably might be a limitation with the game's engine, but it's a UI adjustment that can be much helpful. The Taken can convert giant portals scattered in different areas throughout Cairn as waypoints for fast traveling. Another smaller portal can be made, but only 1 small portal per character in-game can exist at a given time. Teleporting to different areas can be done by either touching on rift portals or opening the world map through the local map menu. Once the world map is accessed, the portal icons on the map have to be clicked to then travel to the area. Fast traveling is an inconvenient process, so this is best done after clearing an area, especially in hardcore mode. One thing that is useful about making rift portals in Grim Dawn is that portals are made at the press of a button. For normal players, this is useful for jumping back into a fight after dying, allowing for continuous exploration of areas. As mentioned earlier, pressing the map button opens a local map menu, opening an enlarged map of the area being explored. Pressing the button below the map switches to the world map. Considering that fast traveling is done through the world map, it boggles the mind why the world map doesn't have its own button. By having a world map button, less steps are needed to travel and allow fast traveling on the fly. It should also be mentioned that the map menu can take up a lot of space, which can be problematic since maps aren't transparent. This puts players in a position where they can only look at the huge map briefly in case they're surrounded in an area full of hazards. The camera is designed in a way that most rooftops and trees become transparent. Thankfully, the camera can be adjusted by rotating it and zooming the camera in or out. That said, zooming is a feature that doesn't really do much and shouldn't have been added to the game. Opening the inventory menu shows what your character looks like up close, removing the need to see what your character looks like. Talking to NPCs opens up a dialog box with their faces showing next to the text speech, removing the need to see the conversation up closely. Finally, combat requires players to completely zoom out the camera to properly analyze the environment, especially when an area has high population of monsters or environmental hazards. Controlling pets can easily be done by placing a pet attack on the skill bar. That said, it is possible to specifically control pets on what they do and what they target. A pet's general behavior can be adjusted by clicking on their portraits, ranging from a general defensive stance to a general offensive stance. Pets can also be individually controlled to attack mobs attacking the character or straying away from the fight, and even heal allies in combat. This is much easier to control using the keyboard and mouse rather than controller because of the lack of inputs the controller has compared to keyboard and mouse setup. A variety of enemies can be encountered and fought in the world of Cairn. Regular enemies have their names displayed in white text. Champions are strong mobs whose name is displayed in yellow. Heroes are mobs whose name is displayed in orange and have a star above them. Bosses are one of the strongest enemies in the game that have their name displayed in purple. Heroes and bosses will drop loot orbs in addition to loot normally dropped like all mobs. Loot orbs are floating spheres that drop items, rewarding players for facing the challenges that heroes and bosses provide. Combat is simple but in-depth. Attacks in Grim Dawn are defined as a damage source that use animations where the weapons deal damage. Spells, meanwhile, are a damage source that use animations from other phenomena. This is important to note because of the three kinds of speed stats in the game: movement speed, attack speed, and cast speed. Both attack speed and cast speed scale up to 200%, while movement speed scales up to 135%. Cast speed and movement speed are simple. If the cast speed is at 100%, that means a character casts one spell per second. Attack speed is completely dependent on the weapon. It should also be noted that all speed types can be increased simultaneously with the total speed stat. The defensive order is comprehensive, and each stat is understandable as well as useful. This is applied to both players and monsters for consistency, making this information an amazing asset for survivability. The first order defense revolves around three stats: fumble, dodge, and projectile deflection. Fumble is a chance for an opponent to completely miss their attack. Dodge is a chance to completely avoid a melee attack, and projectile deflection is the chance to completely avoid a ranged attack. These three serve as the first order of defense. They're often hard to rely on consistently as they aren't common enough in equipment, but can turn the tide of battle in a moment's notice. The next order of defense is dependent on offensive ability and defensive ability. These stats govern the attacker's accuracy as well as the chance to land a critical hit against enemies. An equation is used to determine the attacker's probability to hit based on the offensive ability of the attacker and the defensive ability on the defender. Depending on the probability to hit, any number ranging from 1 to the resulting number will always hit. When the number exceeds 100, the attacks never miss, and the chances to land a critical hit with a higher multiplier are even greater. Once the probability to hit and base damage have been determined, shield wielders have a chance to reduce damage based on the damage that can be blocked. Shields won't always reduce damage though, and when they do, they can't block damage again for some time. The block chance and recovery time vary from shield to shield, making it important to read the stats of the shield. After rolling the damage reduction from shields, the damage can be reduced by a certain percentage, assuming that it is possible to reduce the damage based on the monster type. The next process of damage reduction is dependent if the damage is physical or not. Armor is the first process that reduces physical damage. In combat, an attack lands on a random section of the body. The damage reduced is dependent on the armor rating of the section where the hit lands. Damage reduction is also based on armor absorption, which is the percentage of armor that is actually effective. By default, armor absorption is set to 70%, so if 100 damage was dealt and the part it lands has 100 armor on, then the defender will take 30 damage. Thankfully, items and skills can help increase the armor absorption to 100%, making damage reduction a simple subtraction equation. Take note that there is a damage over time variant of physical damage known as internal trauma. This damage type can't be reduced with armor, and can only be reduced with physical resistance, which also reduces physical damage further. Non-physical damage, on the other hand, can only be further reduced with their respective resistances. 10 damage types are available, with 6 of these damage types having their own damage over time variants. Physical damage has internal trauma, fire has burn, cold has frostburn, lightning has electrocution, acid has poison, and vitality has vitality decay. Pierce, Aether, and Chaos damage have no damage over time variants, and Bleed is the only damage type that is solely damage over time. It seems daunting at first how there are many damage types, but these are all relevant not just because of the lore, but also because this forces specialization in certain damage types on using specific skills. Once damage has been reduced by resistances, it can be further reduced by a flat amount depending on the monster type. This is then followed by two more processes, percent damage absorption and damage absorption. Percent damage absorption is the ability to reduce damage taken by a certain percentage, while damage absorption is the ability to reduce the damage taken by a certain amount. These stats are powerful in not just combat, but in exploration as well. Environmental hazards exist in Grim Dawn. While walking on them, they deal a fixed percent of a character's health, and completely ignore all the previous sections of damage reduction, save for percent damage absorption and damage absorption. With these stats, players have enough time to walk through these hazards alive. Buffs and debuffs also follow specific sets of rules. Buffs can be applied by either auras or skills that temporarily last. Auras can't be stacked, and the highest effect will always take precedence. Meanwhile, skills are independent and can be stacked, meaning wearing two pieces of equipment that offer the same defensive boosts fortify the stats that are being strengthened. Debuffs also act similar to buffs from auras. This is important to note as several skills in the game can be used to reduce specific resistances of enemies, creating opportunities to deal more damage. Conversion is another important combat stat. As the name implies, it changes a specific damage type dealt into another damage type. Conversion can be applied once, and the converted damage can't be converted to other damage types, preventing conversion loops as a result. In the case of physical damage, if a weapon has physical damage and armor piercing, that means that the physical damage is finally converted as pierce damage after being converted to other damage types. Conversion is also applied at the base damage before applying damage bonuses, to ensure that only the converted damage is focused on rather than the base variant. There's also a specific order in which conversion is applied. Conversion from skills and auras are always applied first. Once the damage is converted, the remaining base damage is converted again by equipment, and finally converted as pierce damage if the weapon has armor piercing. This means that if a weapon deals a base of 100 physical damage and a character can convert 50% of physical damage to fire with skills, and convert 50% of physical damage to fire damage with equipment, then the total physical damage converted will be 75%. This was done for balancing issues, so that the content stays challenging since resistance reduction can be applied for more damage. There are also two ways for a defender to deal damage to an attacker: retaliation and reflect damage. Retaliation is damage dealt to a melee attacker whenever their hit lands. Retaliation damage can be acquired through gear and skills and further increased to the point of being lethal. Retaliation is limited because, again, this damage is only dealt to melee attackers. Reflect damage is damage dealt to an attacker based on the damage the attacker dealt to the defender. Some skills provide 100% reflect damage for a short time, while some items can permanently provide small amounts of percent reflect damage. Reflect should by no means be a primary way to deal damage. This is because the ratio between the damage enemies deal to the health they have is so tiny for reflect damage. Players, however, should be wary of reflect damage when enemies have it, because it is possible to design characters that have high ratio between the damage they deal to the health they have. There are also crowd control effects that allow players and enemies alike to turn the tide of combat in their favor. There are three effects that completely disable any action but have immediate recovery: stun, freeze, and petrify. These three effects have resistance stats which shorten the duration of their respective effects. Sleep disables all actions, but ends when the victim is hit. Trap is an effect that disables movement of its victims, making it particularly useful against melee attackers. Slow is a debuff that reduces the attack speed. The duration of the effect can also be reduced with slow resistance. There are also 4 crowd control effects that characters are immune to. These are Knockdown, Convert, Fear, and Confusion. Knockdown temporarily makes a target fly back and fall to the ground. Down enemies start standing up after the knockdown duration ends, but they are completely vulnerable on both the knockdown duration and the recovery animation. Convert temporarily makes an enemy fight by the caster's side. The former is still open to attacks, allowing to weaken certain mobs while thinning out their numbers. Fear causes a victim to run away from the caster, which is particularly useful for ranged characters. Confusion, on the other hand, causes enemies to wander around aimlessly. One crowd control that can affect players greatly is Disruption. While in effect, skills are disabled, limiting actions to the basic attacks and potions. This is noticeable when all skills start recharging simultaneously, and should force players to notice the source of the disruption. Aggro management is a niche mechanic that should be noted for multiplayer and characters that summon pets and minions to fight their battles. Monsters in Grim Dawn often choose their targets based on the target's overall threat, rather than solely the damage dealt. This becomes important to understand in the long run for scenarios mentioned, because even if a character doesn't deal damage but applies debuffs instead, monsters will still go after the character if debuff application is consistent enough. When out of combat, a character's health can passively regenerate immediately with Constitution. Constitution is the gold layer just covering the health bar. This amount is consumed quickly until health is fully restored, providing opportunities to quickly move on to the next fight. It should be noted that Constitution doesn't regenerate, enforcing some caution when exploring areas. That said, there are several ways to restore Constitution. Food rations and Vitality Essences can restore Constitution upon pickup. These items can be found in Journeyman packs or killing monsters. Leftover meals are also left around in different areas in the game, but can only be used once in a session. Some towns also have chefs that can cook food, restoring Constitution, but much like leftover meals, they can only be used once in a session. Leveling up fully restores Constitution, allowing characters to continue fighting. It should also be noted that characters have their Constitution completely restored upon death, which isn't an option when playing a hardcore character. Overall, Grim Dawn offers consistent control over characters and has in-depth combat that provides key points as to how a character can be designed and improved. Character creation is rather simple. The name of the character is simply typed in and the gender selected. It is only in character creation where players must decide if this character can be played in hardcore mode or not. Once this decision has been made, it can't be undone, requiring careful thinking and decision making. Veteran mode can also be toggled in character creation, but unlike hardcore mode, it is possible to switch between normal and veteran mode at any time. At the very beginning of the game, the Taken can only fight with the sword in their hand. This slowly changes after leveling up for the first time. At this point, the character can choose one of 6 masteries to specialize in. Skill points have to be spent on the mastery bar in order to finalize the selection. When a character reaches level 10, another mastery can be chosen to expand their repertoire and create powerful synergies to optimize damage. Mastery selection is permanent, requiring a thorough reading of the abilities available in a mastery before choosing. The 6 masteries are as follows. Soldier is a typically melee-focused mastery with abilities that help characters last longer in a fight. They're often a good mastery when wanting to deal physical and pierce damage. Nightblade is also usually a melee-focused mastery, but with abilities based on dual wielding. Nightblades usually tend to deal cold, pierce, or bleed damage. Demolitionist is a jack-of-all-trades sort of mastery, having access to a mix of ranged, melee, and spellcasting abilities. Most of their damage is in the form of fire and lightning damage. Occultist is a spellcasting mastery that centers on applying debilitating effects and controlling pets. Most of their damage is dealt as chaos, vitality, poison, and acid damage. Arcanist is another spellcasting mastery that has access to devastating magic. Their powers are based on a combination of elemental magic and ethereal magic. Shaman is a mastery that combines melee, spellcasting, and pet summoning abilities. Most of their abilities deal bleed, vitality, and lightning damage. Skills are unlocked after reaching certain mastery levels, which is done by spending skill points on the mastery bar. Investing points in the mastery bar not only helps in unlocking skills, but increases the overall health and energy pool, and general stats of the Taken as well. It should be noted though that once points are placed in the mastery bar, they can't be removed, making it ill-advised to spend more points in the mastery bar than necessary. Skills are assigned one of 2 shapes based on their nature. Active skills have square icons, ranging from offensive attacks and spells to defensive auras. Auras tend to either reserve energy from a character's energy pool or slowly consume energy to permanently sustain auras. Some masteries have auras that are known as exclusive skills. These are auras that provide great benefits to a character without reserving any energy. The caveat, however, is that only one exclusive skill can be active at a time. Passive skills have circular icons. Some circular skills are horizontally aligned with active skills, becoming skill modifiers. Skill modifiers often enhance the potential of skill by either increasing the damage a skill can deal, increasing its area of effect, or even decreasing its recharge time. Other passives that are connected to an active skill but not aligned horizontally are referred to as skill transmuters. Skill transmuters effectively change the utility of a skill. Some transmuters can remove the cooldown of a skill while reducing its damage. Some increase the skill's damage output at the cost of adding a cooldown. The strength and effectiveness of a transmuter is entirely dependent on the intent of using the skill. Another variant of passive skills are weapon pool skills. Weapon pool skills activate off of basic attacks by chance, taking up the chance for a basic attack to occur. When the total chance of these skills exceed 100%, the chance of them activating is then weighted based on the total chance. This is important to note because this means that high damaging skills have a lower chance to activate, meaning decisions have to be made as to what skills are kept to maintain 100% of using weapon pool skills. From level 2 to 50, the character gets 3 skill points each time they level up. From 51 to the max level 85, a character gets 2 skill points leveling up. All of this is designed to force out creativity and specialization, because Grim Dawn is a game that focuses on the development and journey of a character. Skill points can be removed from skills at any time, by talking to a spirit guide and paying the fee to remove them. Prices increase as more points are removed, and the decision is finalized when switching to another window or closing the spirit guide menu. There are some limitations as to what skills can be removed. For example, skill points from active skills can't be completely removed if there are points invested in their transmuters and modifiers. Active skills can't also be entirely removed if there are devotion skills attached to them. Devotion skills are acquired from the devotion system. This mechanic further customizes characters by providing stats that makes characters stronger, as well as providing skills that can have a chance to trigger after using assigned active skills. These stats and skills are often found in stars of different constellations. Devotion points are spent on these stars, which are acquired after restoring shrines in Cairn. Shrines in Cairn either require crafting materials to fix them, or require that monsters within the shrine be killed. Up to 50 devotion points can be obtained, an important detail to keep in mind considering how the devotion system works. Constellations are unlocked by acquiring affinity. The Crossroad constellation has stars that provide one type of affinity when used. If points are used on all the stars of a constellation, then the constellations provide a fixed amount of affinity. So long as the required affinity is met, the constellation is sustained as well as the affinity provided if complete. This means that devotion points spent on stars can be removed anytime, which is done by talking to the spirit guide and removing stars in the devotion window at the cost of money and aether crystals. Provided this doesn't affect the requirements of the constellations in the setup, allowing ingenious planning and creating interesting setups. Unlocked devotion skills have to be attached to skills in order to be used, ensuring that careful planning is taken into consideration. All devotions have a default chance to activate when a certain action is performed when the skill is active or used, but the chance to activate these skills increase as the base recharge time of the attached skill is higher, even to the point of bringing the chance of a devotion skill to be used up to 100%. By being able to adjust the chance for devotion skills to activate, it is possible to find a balance between using high cooldown skills and spammable skills. All in all, the devotion system is interesting and in-depth, as stars often provide skills and stats that range from niche to generally useful. In addition to acquiring skill points as characters level up, one stat point is also acquired every time a character levels up. This one stat point can be used to acquire 8 points of one of 3 stats: Physique, Cunning, or Spirit. Physique refers to the improvement of a character's body, increasing the health pool, health regeneration rate, and defensive ability as a result. Physique usually serves as a stat requirement for maces, axes, two-handed weapons, and heavy armor. Cunning refers to the Taken's combat skills, increasing the physical, pierce, and bleed damage, as well as offensive ability. Cunning is an important requirement for one-handed swords, daggers, and guns. Spirit is a character's affinity for magic, increasing magical damage, energy pool, and energy regeneration rate. Spirit is also necessary to equip rings, necklaces, daggers, wands, magical offhands, and robes. One notable issue with these base stats is that Physique is the more notable stat to invest in. This is because the most effective way to increase specific stats is through equipment and constellations in the devotion system. To top it off, Masteries provide more than enough points to satisfy Cunning and Spirit requirements for various equipment, making Physique the only stat worth investing to ensure survivability through high health pools, increased defensive ability, as well as the ability to equip heavy armor. There will be very rare instances in investing points in cunning or spirit, and only enough points should be invested to use certain equipment. While this doesn't ruin character customization, the way these three stats are designed often make choosing which stat to increase a thoughtless experience. Perhaps this is by design as stat placement is permanent. Even then, the base stats are somewhat of wasted potential, as they could have been designed in a way that no stat is more useful than others. Overall, there are various systems at a player's disposal to enable creativity. Properly understanding the combat mechanics in tandem with character building options creates a game world that can be explored in various ways, leading to a game that has build diversity. Different pieces of equipment are found in various places of the game, such as chests, shops, and even loot from monsters. Assuming the equipment doesn't get destroyed when a humanoid enemy dies, the equipment they wore can be picked up and worn by the taken. This one mechanic may not seem much, but it can potentially make fights more challenging since enemies can wield powerful equipment that can adversely affect characters, such as enemies wielding weapons with the ability to freeze or drain energy. There are about 5 rarity of items in the game, each rarity displayed in specific colors. Common items are displayed in white, while magical items are displayed in yellow. Green is for rare items, blue is for epic items, and purple is for the final rarity, legendary. Magical and rare items are modified versions of 2 base items, common items and monster infrequents. Common items, as the name implies, are regular items that don't have any attributes to them. Monster infrequents are items that are always rare regardless of the affixes present. These items have special attributes and can only be acquired from specific enemies throughout the game, creating a desire to farm in specific locations. The affix system in Grim Dawn is simple. Common items and monster infrequents gain additional stats when prefixes and suffixes are rolled with those items. Magic affixes have up to 2 attributes. While they lack many attributes, they're often compensated with high stats. Rare affixes have at least 3 attributes and begin to drop when a character reaches level 12. The stats offered aren't as high compared to magic affixes, but the amount of stats is especially useful to build up resistances to various damage types, especially when 10 damage types are present in the game. Epic and legendary items are categorized as unique items. This means that when found, they have predetermined stats which can't be improved with modifiers. Epic items are the first tier of unique items that can be found when a character reaches level 20. These items aren't always more powerful than rare items, but can be especially useful during the early game. Due to this, low-level epic items have empowered variants which are better than their original counterparts, but only equipable at higher levels. Legendary items begin to drop at level 50. These items are easily one of the most powerful items in the game, competing with monster infrequents with 2 rare affixes. One interesting aspect of epic and legendary items is that some items are pieces of sets. Bonuses are granted when items under the same set are equipped. What's nice about sets is that they are usually limited to 5 pieces at most, allowing the ability to equip different pieces while receiving the full benefits of sets. Some items and sets also provide skills when equipped. These skills are either active or autocast skills. Active item skills work similarly to the active skills of Masteries, ranging from castable skills to auras. Autocast skills have a fixed chance to activate when performing a certain action. Item skills on uniques are especially handy because some of them provide auto skills that greatly help out dealing damage for certain playstyles. There's vast amounts of loot for players to acquire, but a character can only have 1 main inventory bag and 5 smaller bags at a given time, making space management a must. Thankfully, a loot filter has also been added to the game. It can be toggled in either the options menu or clicking on the toggle next to the health bar. One issue is this adjusts the rarity of items that can be seen, so setting the filter to Magic Plus means that magic or rarer items can be seen. While the loot filter does its job, the loot filter isn't customizable to see desirable or specific affixes. While customizability isn't necessary, it'd be a nice touch to improve the quality of life. Some items though will always appear despite the setting of the loot filter. Such cases are crafting materials and components. Components are items that can be placed on equipment. They are dropped from monsters as pieces, and when the pieces are combined, especially to the point of completion, the effect a component offers becomes even stronger. Other components, when completed, provide item skills for further customization, making components even more important to complete. Components are also important to complete when they serve as ingredients needed to craft items. Blacksmiths can be found in different areas in the game. Knowing where to find these blacksmiths is important, because different blacksmiths offer different bonuses when crafting equipment. This can be seen by going over the anvil icon before crafting to see the bonuses a blacksmith offers, creating the ability to customize specific equipment based on certain needs. Myriads of equipment and components can be crafted when the blacksmith becomes available, but additional equipment and components can be crafted when more blueprints are found. On one hand, this is another wall to go through to get specific items, but the design of the blacksmiths provide an opportunity to customize uniques when a good number of them have fixed stats. Similar to notes, when blueprints are read once, they can't be picked up again, removing redundancy. As mentioned earlier, components can be placed on items, however, they can't be easily removed, which is important to consider when more desirable components are found. Thankfully, inventors can undo component placements, but at a cost. Inventors can either preserve a piece of equipment and destroy the component that was placed, or preserve a component and destroy the piece of equipment where the former is placed. The first option is best when more useful components are available. The second is best when conserving components, especially when better equipment becomes available. It is clear that each option has their own trade-off, but the trade-offs are rarely detrimental in practice. Smugglers can keep items in storage. As long as an area has a smuggler, the items will always be available. Two categories of storages are available. One is for characters' personal use, and another is available across all characters made. There is a limitation to this though, as hardcore characters can't share items with normal characters and vice versa. Soul-bound items also can't be shared. These are items that are permanently bound to one character and one character only. By default, one shared stash and one personal stash are available, but the slots available for shared stash and personal stash can be increased by spending money. The prices look too high at the beginning, but it's fairly easy to earn enough money to purchase all the stash space needed, especially when shared stash space is invested in first. As shown, loot is designed in an interesting way that offers more depth and creativity. For now, let's focus on another system that not only provides more customization, but meaningful endgame as well. The faction system provides useful equipment and tougher challenges. Throughout the game, characters will engage with different groups that are immediately allies or enemies, while meeting other groups that can become either one depending on dialogue choices. Reputation points are earned in order to become famous with allied factions, as well as to become infamous with enemy factions. Reputation for allies is earned when completing quests for them or killing enemies from despised factions. In the case of enemy factions, reputation is gained for attacking their members. Several ranks in fame and infamy can be achieved with factions, with allied factions having more ranks than enemy factions. Meeting a new allied faction makes a character tolerated in that faction. Not much can be done with them at this point other than to complete quests and kill their adversaries. The faction shop becomes available when a character becomes friendly with a faction. The only items that can be purchased are potions that provide temporary buffs when consumed. When a character becomes respected, new equipment and blueprints become available from these stores. In addition to that, the bounty table becomes accessible, and for each session, the table provides 5 bounties to complete for additional reputation. Take note that bounties are provided sequentially, so if say a session was started and the first bounty was turned down, then there are 4 bounties left to complete. When reaching honored status, accessories and augments also become available. Augments are items that can be placed on equipment at the cost of making them soulbound, meaning these can't be shared with different characters via trading or shared storage. But soulbound items can still be sold to vendors in the game. Writs are also available for purchase. These are items that increase the amount of reputation gained to reach the final rank faster. Finally, when a character is revered in a faction, they have access to the best equipment, more blueprints, and better augments in the shop. The equipment is similar to the equipment available when becoming respected with a faction, but higher leveled, making them good equipment to use until better equipment becomes available. In addition to that, mandates are also available to purchase that can be shared among characters a player has made. This greatly increases the amount of reputation gained to hasten the grind for new characters, especially for faster leveling. As mentioned earlier, reputation for enemy factions is gained by killing mobs aligned with that faction, and there's nothing else to it. That said, the more infamous a character is in a faction, the tougher the challenges become, increasing the quality of the rewards in turn. All enemy factions start out hostile towards a character. More monsters of a faction appear in the game as the character is despised by that faction. Encounters shake up though when the Taken becomes hated by a faction, as more hero monsters appear from that faction, which is both a blessing and a curse since heroes provide more loot as mentioned earlier. Reaching the Nemesis rank provides great challenge when facing enemy factions, as Nemesis bosses can now be encountered when roaming enemy territory. Majority of the Nemesis mobs are always encounterable when a new session is loaded after achieving the Nemesis rank, and can only be fought once in a session. Majority of the Nemesis bosses are always encounterable when a new session is loaded after achieving the Nemesis rank, and can only be fought once a session. Take note that they will randomly spawn in various locations that mobs of their respective faction are found, giving the game a sudden spike in difficulty when returning to explored areas to farm for better items and equipment. Nemesis bosses have the potential to drop powerful equipment. Each Nemesis boss have a monster infrequent, which can then be modified further with affixes. Aside from their monster infrequents, there is always a Nemesis trove that is being protected and accessible when the Nemesis boss dies. Nemesis troves will always drop at least one legendary item, be it either an item itself or a blueprint to craft it. Remember that blueprints can only be read once and can't be found or picked up, meaning that there are times when the loot in the Nemesis troves can sometimes be lackluster. Nemesis bosses also have a chance to drop warrants. These are items that can be shared among characters made by the player, increasing the amount of reputation gained by the character that consumed the warrant. In addition to that, some of these bosses are humanoid, meaning that they also follow the previously mentioned loot mechanic for humanoid enemies, potentially increasing the challenge of a fight. The Outcast is a unique character that can be encountered in Act 4, and can become an ally or enemy. When the Outcast becomes an enemy, she becomes stronger for each rank reached with her, to the point that she can drop powerful gear when reaching the Nemesis rank. Nemesis bosses offer endgame opportunities in explored areas. That said, there are other means of endgame available. Rogue dungeons are found in various parts of Cairn. What makes these dungeons different from other areas is that the deeper part is accessed by skeleton keys. These doors don't stay open for long though, and once it closes, the door remains locked for the entire session. While in deeper parts of the dungeons, characters can't use portals to teleport out of the dungeon. Taking this combined with the door being temporarily opened, this means that the Taken must survive at all times until they can find the exit to the dungeon. These dungeons are still rewarding despite their challenges, especially in higher difficulties. The bosses in Rogue dungeons have legendary monster infrequents. The stats are fixed, but stronger variants become available at higher levels. In the ultimate difficulty, the chest at the end of the Rogue dungeon always drops at least one legendary. Overall, endgame is heavily integrated in the game's journey and exploration. Now that the base content has been covered, it's time to turn our attention to the expansion. The Ashes of Malmuth provides various content by not only adding new acts to the campaign, but provide huge changes to gameplay as well. There are only a few assets from the base game reused, but majority of the content consists of brand new designs for buildings, terrains, and enemies. That said, the story will be examined first. Act 5 starts off with Creed trying to find Ulgrim in the Void. After failing to find Ulgrim, it is discovered that Devil's Crossing has been under attack by ethereals from Malmouth. This sets up the Taken's goal to ask for the aid of the Witches of Udenbog to find a way to reach Malmouth. One important thing to note in the story is that the spirit guide dies during the invasion, meaning that characters will have no means of respecializing at the beginning of the new act. This will be problematic for anyone who starts the expansion for the first time, as they have no other means to prepare for skill points, especially since enemies in Act 5 can be potentially difficult. Fortunately, a spirit guide is available after reaching the Coven of Udenbog. After helping the witches, the player then travels to a forest that leads to a rift portal to Malmouth. While inside the Void, the Taken finds Ulgrim and both of them safely leave the portal to the fields of Malmouth. Act 6 begins outside of Malmouth. Upon reaching Malmouth, it is discovered that the gates to Malmouth are closed, and the only other entrance is through the sewers. Eventually, the Malmouth resistance are encountered. These are a group of remaining humans trying to retake the city of Malmouth from the ethereals that took over the region. Eventually, the way is cleared for the Black Legion to enter Malmouth and combine their forces with the resistance. After all this, the Taken is then tasked to enter the crown and take on the leader of the region, the Shaper of the Flesh. After a tough and brutal battle, the Shaper is finally defeated, and the campaign finally ends with Creed giving a monologue in response to the Taken's victory. The expansion is written fairly well, and ends on a high note with an interesting boss battle. which was much needed for Act 4's lackluster final boss. The lore was already well written in the base game, but the expansion adds even more interesting lore for further immersion. Aside from the story, additional means of character customization is also available. For starters, the level cap is increased to 100. An important detail to note: from level 91 onwards, characters only get 1 skill point per level up. Since 2 skill points are required per level up until level 90, this means that a character starting from level 85 gets 20 additional skill points. When completing a quest from the Witches of Utenbog after becoming revered with them, another skill point is earned, tallying it up to a total of additional 21 skill points earned. By increasing the amount of skill points that can be earned, skills available can become stronger or new skills can be acquired, greatly improving the strength and efficiency of a build. 2 new Masteries are also available for players to use. The Necromancer has the ability to control the dead as pets and manipulate life forces to directly deal damage. Their damage is often dealt as vitality, aether, and poison damage. The Inquisitor primarily excels with ranged weapons and uses trinkets that have special enchantments in battle. They often deal damage with pierce and elemental damage. With the dual mastery system, this increases the number of combinations up to 28, further increasing variety. To top it off, the Spirit Guide is now able to remove skill points from the mastery bar, provided that there are no skills invested in the mastery level set, allowing more leeway in creating a character. The devotion cap also increases to 55 upon purchasing the expansion. In addition to that, new constellations are also added to increase customization, with new shrines in the new areas to accommodate the cap. Overall, all of these additions to Grim Dawn further maintain the build diversity present. New items are also available for further customization. Due to the increased level cap, a mythical variant has been added which improves lower leveled epics and legendaries as a means to make them viable in the end game. In addition to that, skill modifiers are also available on certain items. Skill modifiers, as the name implies, adjust the skill in specific ways, ranging from increasing the damage the skill deals, to reducing the cooldown of a skill, to even changing the damage type of a skill. A vast number of high-leveled legendaries and mythical legendaries have skilled modifiers, but are often limited to endgame since they often become equipable after clearing a campaign. That said, there are a number of monster infrequents that acquire skill modifiers in the expansion, with the best part being that these infrequents are accessible even in the earliest levels in the game. Top this off with the affix system, and not only do monster infrequents make useful leveling items, but they can potentially make for one of the most powerful items in the game, making them even more desirable to acquire. Several factions have been added to the game as well, but for the sake of this review, there are 3 significant factions to take note of. The Ethereal Vanguard is an enemy faction consisting of ethereals that reside in Malmouth. Due to the addition of the Vanguard, this essentially means that there are 2 ethereal nemesis bosses. With this in mind, another nemesis boss has been added to represent the Chthonians that can only be found in the expansion areas where the Chthon reside. All of the beasts are now aligned in the Beast faction. Since beasts are everywhere in the game, the Beast faction is the easiest faction to achieve the Nemesis rank with. It should be noted, however, that the Beast Nemesis boss only resides in areas in Act 5. If a player is not careful, their character can quickly reach Nemesis rank with the Beast faction, and that character will be forced to deal with the Beast Nemesis boss while completing the campaign quests in Act 5 in the ultimate difficulty. It's often recommended to then play the expansion content in normal or veteran difficulty just to acquire the new factions, and then play the expansion content again in the ultimate difficulty, since reputation points for allied factions from the expansion can still be gained even when just playing the base content in Elite, while not reaching the Nemesis rank in the Beast faction. As mentioned earlier, the Malmuth Resistance is a group that fights the Ethereals in Malmouth. This faction, along with all of the other allied factions in the expansion, sell legendary equipment in their shop, which makes sense since they're often encountered at levels where legendary items can be acquired. What sets this faction apart though from the others, is that the faction vendors sell potions that increase the amount of experience gained after reaching Revered. The best part about these potions is that they aren't soulbound, meaning these potions can be used by not just the character that purchased the potions, but by other characters made by the player as well, allowing for even faster leveling. It should be noted that these potions can be expensive due to their pace-changing capabilities. Factions aside, a new rogue dungeon is also available for players to explore. This rogue dungeon is easily accessible, but it is home to powerful beasts that have been corrupted by both the ethereal and chaotic energies. This follows the regular design of roguelikes, making this dungeon a tough but rewarding dungeon. Many other aspects have been increased in Grim Dawn as well when installing the expansion, but those will all be left up for the player to discover, as Grim Dawn is a game that excels in exploration and discovery. That said, there's also another purchasable game mode available, and it's surprisingly engaging for its price tag. The Crucible is a game mode that completely deviates from the campaign. To access the Crucible after purchasing the DLC, click on Campaign Mode. This allows players to choose between the Campaign Mode or Crucible Mode. In this mode, players fight waves of enemies until they clear 10 waves or until the character dies. The wave starts when talking to the Master of the Crucible, Lokar. All the service NPCs are available in this mode, but they can't be talked to while a wave is in session. After clearing 10 waves, the character must talk to Lokar and decide between continuing the run or ending the run. Ending the run opens the door behind and offers chests full of loot. Clearing more waves offers greater rewards. That said, the rewards are lesser in quantity and quality if the character dies. After wave 30, mutations affect the next waves. These are specific effects that are randomly applied in a set of 10 waves. These can either affect enemies or players when applied. More mutations are applied as characters go through more waves. At the start of the wave, a timer starts. If a wave is cleared before the timer runs out, the timer extends, which helps increase the score multiplier of the scoreboard. If the timer runs out, the timer is reset, which resets the multiplier to 1. This may not seem much at first, but the higher the overall score, the greater the rewards contained in the chests. Tributes are acquired after ending a Crucible run. These are a form of currency that can be used to acquire devotion points, sentries that can be constructed in an arena, or temporary power-ups. Sentries and power-ups have a fixed rate, but the tribute cost for devotion points increase when players have more devotion points. Checkpoints are available after clearing specific waves. A character can start off at those points anytime provided they spend tribute points. This puts players in a position to find how to manage tributes. 3 difficulties are also in Crucible mode. Aspirant is Crucible's normal mode, Challenger is akin to Elite, and Gladiator is essentially ultimate difficulty. New difficulties are unlocked after clearing wave 100. Characters that unlock these difficulties can purchase consumables that unlock new difficulties for other characters. For a game mode that costs $5, there's a lot that this mode can offer, and even provide an interesting alternative for endgame. It should be noted that Grim Dawn is primarily a single-player game, but multiplayer is also available, be it the base game or the expansion. It was important to bring up the expansion first though, due to the nature of multiplayer in Grim Dawn. Multiplayer can be set up through either LAN or internet. Online multiplayer isn't a refined experience, as the game uses peer-to-peer connection. When choosing to play multiplayer, players have the choice of either hosting a lobby or joining a lobby. Hosts can create lobbies, where only up to 4 people can join. These lobbies can have a password set up so that only friends can join, provided the password is shared. The way loot is dropped can also be set to instance, where players get their own drops, or shared, where items are dropped for all players to see. Instance loot is best for hosting public lobbies so that nobody can grab all the loot. Shared loot is best with friends as a means to point out loot that players can use for their builds. Trading can be done between players by right-clicking on a character portrait and selecting Trading. Multiplayer is limited though, as not all players can play with each other. If Grim Dawn was launched on Steam, then multiplayer is only possible with other Steam owners. If Grim Dawn was downloaded from GOG, then multiplayer is only possible with other GOG owners. Another limitation to multiplayer is that players who install the expansion can only play with other players who install the expansion. There's no way for players who only have the base game to play with players who install the expansion. On one hand, this segregates the community, but a benefit to this is that it's a surefire way to prevent compatibility problems. Patches for Grim Dawn are applied on different dates for Steam and GOG, so if one version was outdated compared to the other, then this could cause problems if Steam and GOG owners could play with each other because some patches apply huge changes to gameplay. A similar case can be said between expansion owners and base owners. As shown, the expansion affects the entire experience in the game, and there are many questions to answer if base owners can play with the expansion owners. Should base owners play expansion content they never purchased? Should expansion owners not be allowed to pay the content they paid for just because they played with base owners? How can expansion content run for one player and not for another player in the same session? Crate Entertainment is a company that consists of 13 members, so segregating players takes a load off their mind and focus on other projects such as further balancing the game and making the new expansion. Multiplayer overall is competent. There are different public lobbies that can be found, and even when Grim Dawn is primarily single player, there's a community present that makes finding multiplayer sessions possible. The Grim Dawn community is active in two areas. The forums is the first and easiest area to find. This can be found in the official Grim Dawn site. The forums is a good place to go to directly contact developers of the game. In addition to that, forum members post different build guides, links to mods for playing the game, and links to third-party programs that improve quality of life. An unofficial Discord server was made by fans of the game, and is a place where most players are active. Aside from the quick discussion, voice chat channels are also available, which is useful for multiplayer sessions. A multiplayer economy doesn't exist in Grim Dawn. This isn't exactly a bad thing, because the community is friendly enough to create trading where everyone benefits, to the point that some people are willing to give items for free. Grim Dawn doesn't have a Steam workshop, but players develop mods and upload it in the forums for people to play. To install a mod, simply place the folder of that mod into the mods folder in the installation folder. Mods are essentially game modes and are accessed by clicking on the campaign button and choosing what game mode to play, similar to Crucible mode. A major difference though is that characters made before installing the mod can't be used to play the mod by default, meaning most of the time a new character has to be made to play a mod. There is a way to make characters playable in a mod, but this won't be touched on for this video. There will be a link though in the description below that has a guide to do just that. Aside from mods, the community has made several third-party programs. One member, for example, made a Grim Tools site that contains an item database, a monster database, a map, and a build planner. There's even an offline version for the item database and build planner in the forums. Another useful program is the GD Stash, a program that allows players to transfer items from the stash to an item database, allowing players to keep many items as they want, and even craft items however they want. It's safe to say that Grim Dawn caught the interest of enough players to establish a thriving community with its overall execution. Grim Dawn is amazing. It's possible to see how much care and intricacy was taken in the creation of the game, from the world design despite its limited graphics, to the lore in the game, to the depth of combat and character customization. Endgame is engaging, and it's always fun to play the campaign again and again with different characters. To top it off, the game is designed in a way that the base game is interesting enough to play, while mods can enhance the experience. The story is weak in terms of execution, but character progression immerses players enough into the game. Grim Dawn can be purchased on either Steam or GOG, but be sure to keep in mind the limitations to multiplayer mentioned earlier. The base game is $25, Ashes of Malmouth is $18, the Crucible is $5, but each and every single one is worth the purchase considering the time that can be sunk into them, as well as the level of creativity, engagement, and immersion in the player's disposal. This is a game heavily recommended for anyone interested in RPGs in vein of the Diablo franchise. I want to thank you for taking time to watch this video. It took me a while to work on this video, so it's nice to know that there are people watching. And now that I assembled a new PC, I'll finally be recording footage and making videos in 1080p 60fps, meaning I'll continue making videos. Leave a comment on my video for suggestions because I really want to get into reviewing as a hobby, and your feedback will help me a great deal. Until then, I'll see you in the next video.